Welcome everyone. I'm Shivani Gupta, Senior Associate Editor, CNN News18. And joining me today is Avi Yemini, who's one of the two individuals from Rebel News who has gone viral after grilling Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla on the sidelines of the Davos World Economic Forum meet. Avi, thanks a lot for joining us, first of all. And how does it feel to be either one of the most hated individuals or one of the most loved? Because your clip of you and your colleague Ezra grilling the Pfizer CEO in Davos has gone viral. It has been watched by nearly 20 million people across the world. It has been discussed and debated here in India as well. So, how does it feel with all the reactions coming in?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. Look, I'm used to being either the most loved or most hated person in the room, so that's nothing new
Mm,
to us. That's why we're called Rebel News. That's what we do. We ask the questions that the mainstream media generally won't touch, and that often that comes with either those that don't believe everything they see and hear, that they support it and they enjoy that and they like to see another perspective and they like to see somebody challenging the narrative. And obviously,
mm,
there are those sheep that just believe everything, no matter how much sense, how much it doesn't make any sense, and
mm,
how much it changes over the period. Just like this vaccine story, we've seen since the beginning of the vaccine rollout how the story has changed. We were told in the beginning that it had 100% efficacy, as in stopping the transmission. It was the reason that vaccines were mandated almost all around the world. Here in Australia, people lost their entire livelihoods because they didn't trust it or they wanted to give it time. And no one was ever to answer for it. It was, you saw with Pfizer and all the vaccine producers, they were given often indemnity by governments to basically
mm,
run with it. I think India, correct me if I'm wrong, they're the only ones
mm.
or one of the main markets that didn't. So India got it right where they didn't indemnify. In fact, I still don't comprehend why you would need to indemnify something that you say at the time had 100% efficacy. And the reason
Mm.
is clear now that they knew it didn't. And this was the opportunity. I'm, honored to be one of two people that got the chance to put the questions to him. But these weren't our questions. These were the questions of millions, if not billions, of people worldwide, whether they got vaccinated or not. There were a lot of
Mm.
people that saw this from the beginning and they questioned it from the beginning and they didn't want to get the vaccine and they held strong. And there's a lot of people that feel ripped off. I'm not even talking about people that were injured or people that know others that were injured. It was just people that read the data now and say, hold on a second, you forced me to take this because we were promised that, and it didn't eventuate. And there's obviously a lot of taxpayers including myself that we were forced to pay for this thing because we were promised certain outcomes which didn't happen.
So, what would you say to people who say that you are wrongly vilifying Pfizer or any vaccine maker? Because ultimately, if you look at the pandemic, vaccines did save millions of lives. Yes, there are some concerns over some of their data linked to the senior population, and yes, they're this possibly initially it was given to feel that you should take the vaccine even if you don't want it, because then the transmission will stop due to your near and dear ones, and therefore everyone should take the vaccine even if you personally don't want it, but to protect the larger community everyone should take the vaccine. I get that point that it was projected as if transmissions will go down. Initially they said that you won't have to wear a mask if you take a vaccine, but then they realize you have to wear a mask even if you take a vaccine. But ultimately, vaccines did save lives. So, how would you respond to those who say that you're wrongly vilifying vaccine makers?
I think the question is about honesty. They tell us now that it's completely the vaccine that's saving all these lives. Sorry, but I just don't believe everything they tell us. Firstly, I don't believe them when it comes to vaccine injuries. I don't believe them that the data that they provide regarding how many lives it in fact did save is true, because you've got to remember at the same time, um, compared to the beginning of the pandemic, it's a different variant. It's softened out anyways, and I don't know if you know. I know a lot of people that are unvaccinated, and they went through probably lighter than other people. It didn't really make a difference. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it was, it's clear cut that it was that everyone I anecdotally know that weren't vaccinated, who suffered from COVID, that they certainly weren't struggling harder than those who were vaccinated. So I just find it hard to take their word for it, especially when there is so much money being thrown around, so much taxpayer money being thrown around. And again, it goes back to the point of these questions should have been asked, not by myself or Ezra. It should have been asked by the mainstream media who had access to the Pfizer CEO from day one and who had access to the government from day one. We're rebels. We don't get that access. The only way we get that access is by crashing their party in Davos on the sidelines. And that's what we did. So I think asking questions should never be the problem. It wasn't just about vilifying him. I can understand, that's a build-up of 2 years, and that's built up frustration, not just of ours, but on behalf of millions around the world.
So, how was it like when you were indeed, as you said, crashing his party and he obviously didn't respond to any of the questions that you were posing? How was it like before and after that as well, first of all? If you could share behind the scenes of what exactly
Yes,
happened.
look, as a reporter on the ground, especially in somewhere like Davos,
Hmm.
where you can't plan who you're going to meet, you don't know.
Hmm.
We met world leaders. We bumped into business, the most powerful business people on the planet. Some people we didn't even realize. They just walked past us, and until it clicked who they were, it was already too late. And you often only get one or two questions in. And you got to remember, even as often as I do this, when you meet someone like that you have so many questions for on behalf of so many, you suddenly get this massive adrenaline rush, and your brain farts. You basically forget everything. You sit there going, "Wait, who's Pfizer again?" And so it's such a quick beast, and we did get a lot longer with him than we'd ever imagined would get with anyone. He did try running away. You can see in the footage, there's quickly scuffling to a corner, and then they realize that it's fenced off. But we just kept following, and because there was two of us, we were able to interject with each other, just as we were thinking what were the issues we needed to work through. Yes, now in hindsight, I look back, I watch that footage, and I know a lot of people are excited about it. Some are angry. I look at it and I think, oh, I wish I could have just asked this, or I could have rephrased that question. But it is what it is, and even in my capacity, it's always a learning curve for me, and this was certainly a big learning moment where I think that it is important for us to be really, really prepared to have these long interactions with those that we think need to be held account, most of all on our planet, for whatever issue. And this is not just about COVID, it's not just about the vaccine. There are always these narratives, and they often stem from places like the World Economic Forum, where people get to dictate our life. And not every country, for whatever reason, is as strong as yours in fighting back and not cowering to the pressure. And often we do bear the brunt of those decisions made in Davos or in places like Davos. So it is important for alternative media to step in and do that job. So I hope, for those that are watching it thinking, oh, you could have done better. Well, I'm with you. I wish I could have done better, and I hope next time I will do better. But for what it was, I'm pretty proud of that moment. I think, and the numbers speak for themselves. Just on one platform, on Twitter alone, it's got 20 million hits. It's been banned on Facebook and YouTube as misinformation. I don't know how asking questions of the Pfizer CEO, no matter how outrageous you may think the question is, how the question itself could be misinformation. If it was misinformation, the CEO, the guy in charge, was there to answer it. He could have corrected us, and we aired the whole thing. So he could have corrected us, and it would have been correct on their platforms. But obviously, this is not about misinformation. They don't care about misinformation. These are the same platforms that banned people back in the beginning of the rollout for saying that it was ineffective against transmission. So you can trust them as far as you can throw them. And it's interesting because the fact that they did ban it from those platforms made people only want to watch it more on the platforms that it's available, which is Twitter. Thank God for Elon Musk, and another platform called Rumble, where that they don't censor these sorts of conversations.
Did you very quickly become like, was there any blowback in Davos after you did this? Because you were there for a couple of days post this as well.
There was there was a little bit. You could see there was suddenly you were suddenly looked at by many people, especially organisers that were hanging around. But surprisingly, there were those that walked up to us and quietly told us, God bless you for doing that. I'm here for business. I'm here to make contacts. I'm not really part of all that, but good on you for standing up. And it's been a crazy ride, and somebody had to do it. So not everybody in Davos is part of that evil institution, but we certainly were looked at, and it did make our job a little bit harder after that, because the way we kind of operated in Davos is that they all wear their name tags out. And it's kind of a class system. They show, they want to show that they're part of the invited guests. And especially when they have the white with the thick blue line, it means that they've been invited by this, special prestigious institution. So they want everyone to see it. But, after that incident, suddenly they were hiding them again. It happened last Davos as well, when a couple of the videos gained traction about, whether it's talking to media personalities or whatever. I think last time he was also speaking to the WHO. Suddenly, it's like the memo comes out. Interestingly enough, this time in Davos at the WEF, because we do have friends within, the alternative media that did manage to get passes. When they give you the passes, they actually now, as opposed to last year, they tell you not to show it outside the WEF actual Congress in the non-secured area. The only reason that could have happened is because we were doing this last meeting. So it'll be interesting meetings going forward, what actually happens, because it's kind of a fight between the institution that's trying to protect their attendees, because the last thing they want is attendees not coming because they're scared of being confronted. But then you also have the attendees that like to show their position and their royalty within Davos. So it'll be interesting, but I can promise you this: nothing will stop us. We'll go back next year, and whatever the issues are, Rebel News will be there to ask it.
Finally, I do want to understand from you. You obviously believe in this very strongly, and there is a need sometimes to get those alternative questions out, because the way it works is sometimes, even if you're thinking it, those questions don't get asked because they're uncomfortable and unsavory. In India, the situation is a little bit different. We are not so distrustful of the big pharma. Our vaccination drive was very, very successful. We had 2 vaccines being made in India. There was no indemnity issue. As you very rightly said, there was a lot of pressure put on the Indian government to give Pfizer the indemnity and allow them to roll out their vaccines in India. But the Indian government resisted that pressure. And that is why the whole Pfizer CEO being grilled is resonating in India. Because even at that time, before this video came out, there was, of course, a back and forth happening in the public domain and the news domain as to why should we allow Pfizer with indemnity in India. In a large country like India, it doesn't really work like that. But I want you to explain to our viewers, because I have tracked this over the last couple of years, especially in US and UK, there were large anti-vaccine drives. People were distrustful of the big pharma and what the governments were doing. Part of the story also, Avi, is that the governments took bad decisions, or the governments, took decisions that the public didn't trust, that were fully in their interest, or that the governments were not really being honest. So part of the responsibility is with the government, part of it is, of course, with Big Pharma. But I want you to explain to viewers here, why is it that there is such a distrust against Pfizer, especially where you are in Australia or in US and UK and Canada? What is it that the people are most angry about against Pfizer?
Look, I think it's a mix of those things, and also there's no one group. There's obviously people that have been anti-vaccine for most of their life. They are a tiny minority, even of the big protests you saw. I can speak for Australia. I attended. I covered all those protests, and it was a diverse group of people. You couldn't put them into one single box as much as the mainstream media tried to. It was actually, mainly ethnic groups and from all around the world. I couldn't pick to one person and say that's who was at the anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine protest. Now, I think the vast majority of people, their problem was, at least in the beginning, not necessarily the vaccine itself. It was the mandates around the vaccine. It was them telling the citizens that, and this, remember, happened a year and a half into the pandemic, so we'd spent almost all that time in some form of lockdown. And there was already, maybe the first lockdown a lot of people supported. Even I supported the first lockdown. We were freaked out. We saw these images of people dying on the streets in China, and it was very hard to figure out what was true and what was fake. But as time went on and we saw the data and we understood the virus a bit more, and we realized, well, people that are at risk, they can lock down, while healthy, fit people can take their own precautions and take their own risks and go to work. But they started mandating everything, and they started forcing everything. And then when the vaccines came out, they forced it and they justified it, promising that. And this is the big thing, that and that's why it's so important to put those questions to him, is because it was all about transmission in the beginning. It was about, you need to take this vaccine, not for yourself, not to protect yourself. You have the right to choose whether you're going to protect yourself or not. That's what they told us. They go, but in this case, you don't have that right. You lose that right because it only works if everyone gets it, or the vast majority gets it, because it stops the spread. Now, that turned out to be a massive lie. And it turned out to be a lie that they knew was a lie at the time. They never checked that. They didn't have the data. They didn't know the details. There was no way, but they promised. They promised in the beginning at 100% efficacy. Then they went to 90, 80, 70, and that turns out that it was nothing. So I think the mistrust has grown. I think the vast majority of people that are anti the COVID vaccine have had every other vaccine in their life, especially in Australia. Vaccine uptake is very high, 95. What coronavirus has done, what the pandemic has done, what the vaccine mandates have done, what Pfizer's lies have done, I think it's dropped people's trust in big pharma, that now every other vaccine is going to have lower uptake, which is sad when it comes to the important ones. But even me, as an individual that has always taken every vaccine, even when I've flown overseas and they told you, oh, you're going to that country, you better have this shot, I've always just done it. Not anymore. I actually don't trust them anymore, because I realize that they're willing to lie for to make money, which I'm embarrassed that I didn't see that before. But at what cost? You would think that they wouldn't put us all at risk. But right now, when I look at the data, especially when it comes around Pfizer, AstraZeneca, but Pfizer's been a big one here, and you see that they're even covering up, and you're not allowed to discuss. And it's not just me. I'm talking about doctors are being silenced from discussing the adverse reaction. I don't believe a word they say about anything anymore. And certainly indemnity shouldn't be on the table. But I think it's time for, um, royal commissions to be able to look into this and hold people accountable, those who knew, or those who were willing to put the people of Australia, or the people around the world, at risk by not knowing, and knowing that they don't actually know, and promising and giving false hope just for compliance. I think they all need to be held accountable. And hopefully this is one small step in that direction. I do feel we're heading that way. And I think big tech as well has to be held accountable. The fact that, you've seen over the last few weeks, Elon Musk has been releasing the Twitter files, where you're seeing that unhealthy relationship between authorities and big tech to control the narrative, to essentially control the people. I know everybody sounds like conspiracy theorists these days. The fact is, so many of those conspiracies through the pandemic have turned out to be true. If I'd be listening to myself now, listening to this interview, probably 3-4 years ago, I would have gone, what happened to Avi? Where did he lose his mind? And unfortunately, that's the real reality today. And I think skepticism is a good thing. And I think more people should ask more questions. And I don't think any question should ever be out of bounds. And I think people should, if you've got nothing to hide, answer the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for talking to us. You're absolutely bang on that skepticism has crept in and there's a trust deficit. The combination of big tech and everything we're getting to know and what happened during the pandemic certainly has raised certain larger questions on what the public can believe and cannot believe. I do thank you, Avi, for joining us and all the very best
Thank
for the future as well. So, guys, are we okay? Are we done?